The wind howled across a silent airfield, cold, metallic, and laced with the scent of burnt oil. A man in a torn gray uniform knelt beside the wreckage of an American bomber, its wings folded like broken arms under the fading European sun. He wasn't supposed to touch it. Yet his hands, rough from years of labor, moved as if they remembered something older than allegiance, something called duty. Somewhere the war was still screaming. But here, only the hum of an unfinished engine answered him. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed. Every week we uncover the stories the world forgot. His name was Karl Reinhardt, a mechanic for the German Luftwaffe, an ordinary man in an extraordinary war. Born in Stuttgart in 1912, he grew up surrounded by steel and steam. His father repaired locomotives. His mother stitched uniforms. By 1938, when the world balanced on the edge of madness, Karl's hands could assemble an aircraft engine blindfolded. He wasn't a soldier at heart. He was an engineer of dreams. He believed machines could save mankind, not destroy it. But in 1939, his country decided otherwise. The Reich needed men like him, and so Karl traded his blue overalls for gray. His station, an airbase outside Bremen. The work was relentless. Engines screamed from dawn till midnight, and the air smelled of fuel, frost, and fear. Every day, new bombers arrived half dead from missions over Britain, and every night, Karl resurrected them. He didn't see ideology in the metal, just motion, symmetry, and life. In 1942, the war turned. American bombers darkened German skies, filling them with thunder. Factories that once birthed aircraft now burned beneath them. Each raid felt like the sky itself was punishing Germany for its arrogance. Karl worked under dim lanterns as sirens wailed, tightening bolts while dust shook from the rafters. He rarely looked up anymore. Death was just another sound in the distance. But one dawn, something impossible appeared. A B-17 Flying Fortress, one of America's giants, came down intact near the outskirts of Bremen. It had been crippled by flak, its engine sputtering, its crew vanished. By miracle or madness, it crash-landed almost gently on a frozen field. Soldiers surrounded it like wolves circling prey. The brass ordered immediate inspection. Engineers wanted to strip it, study it, dissect it. Karl was chosen to lead the recovery. When he first climbed into the bomber's cockpit, his breath caught. The controls, the design, everything felt both alien and familiar. "They build like we dream," he murmured. The fortress smelled of coffee and sweat and courage. Maps still lay open, riddled with notes and pencil marks in English. Bullet holes patterned the fuselage like stars. For a long moment, Karl forgot which side he was on. Days turned into weeks as German engineers dismantled the aircraft. They copied blueprints, weighed armor plates, measured propeller pitch. But it was Karl who noticed the heart of it. The subtle genius of its hydraulic system, the redundancy of its circuits, the kindness of its design toward the men who flew it. "They build for life," he told his supervisor quietly. "We build for victory." His words earned him a cold stare. Still, he kept working. Late at night, under blackout curtains, Karl studied the American systems. He scribbled notes in a small journal, a forbidden act. In those pages, he compared two worlds. One obsessed with dominance, the other with endurance. He saw the truth engineers often see before politicians do. Whoever built better would outlast whoever killed faster. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, America was building at a speed that defied reason. In Detroit and Seattle, men and women who had never seen combat assembled bombers like clockwork. Karl could not know their names, yet he would one day repair the dream they were forging. By early 1944, the Allies were winning the air. Germany's factories struggled to breathe. Rumors spread through the workshops: defeat, surrender, despair. But Karl's obsession remained, understanding that American plane. He believed technology was the real language of peace. If men could learn from engines, he told a fellow mechanic, they'd stop trying to destroy them. Then came the order that would change his life. The Reich was collapsing. As Allied troops closed in, the Luftwaffe began destroying everything that could be captured: planes, prototypes, documents. Karl's unit received instructions to burn the B-17 wreckage and erase all notes. He hesitated. Those pages, that machine, it wasn't just enemy property. It was knowledge, design, humanity preserved in metal. He couldn't destroy it. That night, under cover of blackout, Karl packed his notebooks and blueprints into a small metal box. He buried it near the edge of the airfield, marking the spot with a broken wrench. "Someday," he whispered, "someone will need this more than we do." The next weeks were chaos. Allied forces advanced through northern Germany. Towns surrendered in silence. Karl and his crew were captured by American troops near Hanover. He expected imprisonment, or worse. Instead, something strange happened. The American officer in charge noticed Karl's precision tools and asked, "Mechanic?" Karl nodded. "Then maybe you can help us fix what we broke." He didn't understand. The officer explained. American bombers were grounded nearby, damaged in raids. The engineers needed anyone who understood engines. War was still ending, but machines didn't wait for peace treaties. And so, within days, Karl Reinhardt, the German mechanic who once repaired the Luftwaffe, found himself tightening bolts on American planes. He spoke little English. They spoke little German, but engines spoke for them. Together they patched hydraulic lines, cleaned carburetors, replaced spark plugs. A curious trust grew in that hangar. Men who had tried to kill each other now shared cigarettes over engines. One American pilot joked, "You fix 'em too good, Hans. We'll have to hire you." Karl just smiled. Meanwhile, news crackled through radios. Berlin had fallen. Hitler was dead. The war finally was ending. Yet inside that hangar, history was already rewriting itself quietly, one wrench turn at a time. At night, Karl lay on the hangar floor listening to distant celebrations. He thought of the metal box buried near Bremen. What he'd saved wasn't just paper, it was proof that knowledge had no side. In that silence, he realized what the war had truly taught him. Destruction can't be undone by victory, only by repair. Across the ocean, the United States prepared to rebuild a shattered world. They would need engineers, thinkers, builders, not soldiers. And somewhere in the rubble of Germany, one mechanic held the blueprint to a bridge between enemies. He didn't yet know it. But the hands that once fixed the Luftwaffe's engines were about to help launch America into a new era, the age of flight that would conquer not nations, but the sky itself. The war was over. But the world felt like an unfinished machine, half rebuilt, half broken. Smoke still hung over Europe, drifting above fields once green, now gray and charred. Factories stood hollow, their roofs torn open like ribs. In those ruins, people searched not for victory, but for purpose. Karl Reinhardt was no longer a prisoner. The Americans called him Charlie, a name easier for them to pronounce, and let him keep working at the captured airfield outside Hanover. He had nowhere else to go. His hometown of Stuttgart was rubble, his parents missing, his workshop gone. But among the American engines, he found a strange kind of peace. Machines at least made sense. They didn't lie, hate, or betray. The GIs treated him kindly. Some shared rations, some stories, some laughter. One, a young lieutenant named Jack Nolan, took special interest in Karl's mechanical skills. Jack was from Ohio, a farm boy turned flight engineer. He had lost friends to German fire, yet when he watched Karl work, he didn't see an enemy. "You fix things like you're apologizing to them," he said once, half joking. Karl smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." As months passed, the world began to reorganize itself. Lines were drawn, flags raised, zones occupied. But behind the paperwork, another race was beginning, a race not for land, but for minds. The Americans called it Operation Paperclip. They were quietly gathering Germany's best engineers and scientists, men who had built rockets, planes, and technology far ahead of its time. To rebuild the world, they needed knowledge, even if it came from yesterday's enemies. Karl didn't know it yet, but his name was about to appear on one of those lists. One afternoon, an American intelligence officer visited the airfield. He watched Karl restore a damaged P-47 Thunderbolt with precision that bordered on reverence. Every bolt torqued exactly, every cable laid perfectly. The officer turned to Jack and whispered, "That one's different. He's not fixing machines. He's studying them." Days later, Karl was summoned to a temporary command office. The officer slid a paper across the desk. "You were an engineer with the Luftwaffe." "Yes," Karl replied carefully. "You worked on Allied aircraft after surrender." Karl nodded again. "And you buried something near Bremen?" Karl froze. For a long moment, he said nothing. "How do you know that?" The officer leaned back. "We're very thorough. We found your field notes. Brilliant work. You saw things most of our men didn't even notice." Karl's hands trembled slightly. He thought of the small metal box, the blueprints, the sketches. "You dug it up." "We did," the officer said. "And we think you can help us understand it." Within weeks, Karl was relocated under Allied supervision to a new site, the once secret Peenemünde airfield, now in Allied hands. It was a place soaked in contradiction, once the cradle of German innovation, now the seedbed of American ambition. Karl found himself among men who had designed the V-2 rockets, the engines that had terrorized London. But the war had erased clear lines. Now, these same minds worked under American flags, dreaming of propulsion systems that could reach the edge of space. For Karl, it felt like stepping into the future and the past at the same time. The first project he was assigned to wasn't glamorous. He was tasked with re-engineering captured engines, both German and Allied, to find efficiency improvements. But as he studied them, Karl noticed something strange. The B-17's design principles, the very ones he had buried, were being quietly integrated into new American prototypes. Simplified systems, easy-to-repair modules, safer engine mounts. It was as if the American engineers had taken the soul of the fortress and fused it with the precision of German engineering. Karl saw it clearly. "They're building not just to win wars," he murmured one night, sketching in the corner of the hangar. "They're building to make the sky theirs forever." Jack Nolan, now serving as a technical liaison, found him drawing under a single flickering lamp. "What's that?" Karl turned the notebook toward him. A concept design, aerodynamic, sleek. "An aircraft that never has to choose between speed and safety," he said. "Something that flies because it was built by men, not for war, but for wonder." Jack grinned. "You're a dreamer, Karl." "Dreaming is the only thing they haven't outlawed yet," Karl replied. As months turned to years, Karl's skill became invaluable. American officers sent him to study engine dynamics in France, then to a research site in England. Everywhere he went, his quiet genius left fingerprints, tiny design changes that would ripple through aviation for decades. He was still officially an enemy alien, but among the mechanics, he was one of them. He never forgot the irony. The German mechanic who once fixed Luftwaffe bombers was now improving American aircraft. By 1947, rumors spread about a new kind of aircraft, a jet faster than sound. Karl was transferred to the United States under a temporary research visa. He stepped off the ship at New York Harbor with nothing but a small suitcase, and his old wrench, the same, one that had marked the buried box years ago. As he looked up at the skyline, he felt something he hadn't in years. Awe. America was alive. It buzzed with energy, construction, optimism. Streets gleamed with new cars, neon lights blinked above diners, and everywhere he looked, people were building something. He remembered the ruins of Stuttgart and thought, this is what rebuilding looks like when hope survives. He was assigned to work with Curtiss Wright, an aircraft manufacturer collaborating with the U.S. Air Force. At first, his co-workers treated him with polite distance. "A German," they whispered. But respect grows faster than prejudice when skill is undeniable. Within weeks, Karl had redesigned a faulty turbine that had baffled the team for months. One night, the company's chief engineer, Ed Morrison, watched Karl at work. "You think like a pilot," he said. "You fix what they fear," Karl smiled faintly. "I fix what I once broke." Word spread through the company about the quiet German who could make engines sing. His designs improved fuel efficiency, reduced maintenance time, and, most remarkably, made planes easier to repair mid-flight damage. Pilots noticed. If Reinhardt touched your engine, they joked, it could take a bullet and still come home. But Karl didn't see glory in that. What he saw was redemption in motion. Every bolt he turned for America felt like an apology to the past. Meanwhile, beyond the hangars, the world had entered a new tension, the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union raced to dominate technology, and every invention became a weapon in waiting. Karl found himself again in a familiar paradox. The very innovations meant to secure peace were being prepared for the next war. He confided his unease to Jack Nolan, who had also moved to the States under a civilian contract. "They'll use it again, won't they?" Karl asked quietly one evening, looking at a prototype engine. Jack sighed. "Maybe, but at least now we can build it right." Those words lingered. Build it right. To Karl, it meant more than engineering. It meant purpose. Machines built wrong destroy, but machines built right endure. And if endurance was the truest measure of civilization, then perhaps he could help America do what Germany couldn't, build a future that lasted. That belief became his silent mission. He began mentoring young American engineers, teaching them precision, patience, and respect for the craft. He never lectured, he simply showed. "You don't fight the metal," he would say. "You listen to it." His students adored him. They called him Doc Gear. By 1950, his influence had quietly shaped dozens of engine designs that would power the next generation of American bombers and civilian aircraft alike. Some of his notes even reached the Abel X-1 project, the plane that would soon break the sound barrier. When he heard the news that Chuck Yeager had crossed Mach 1, Karl sat alone in his workshop, smiling faintly. "Good," he whispered. "Let the sky finally forgive us." Yet for all his contributions, Karl never sought recognition. His name rarely appeared on patents. He didn't attend ceremonies or give speeches. He believed his legacy wasn't in words. It was in every engine that refused to fail, every plane that came home safely, in quiet moments. He still thought of the airfield at Bremen, the frozen ground, the buried box, the first time he saw the B-17. He wondered if anyone else ever understood what he had seen that day, that machines could carry mercy if men allowed them to. Jack visited him often. Over coffee in small diners, they talked not of war, but of machines, music, and memory. Jack once asked, "Do you ever miss Germany?" Karl looked out the window. "I miss what it could have been," he said softly. "But maybe that's what I'm fixing." Across America, his quiet genius spread through blueprints, through classrooms, through the very rhythm of flight. The country that once bombed his homeland now flew safer because of him, and yet Karl Reinhardt remained a ghost of two worlds, too German for America, too American for Germany. But perhaps that was his destiny, to live not for a flag, but for the craft that outlasted every nation, repair. By the mid-1950s, America was soaring. Jet trails stitched the sky like signatures of progress, and the hum of propellers had given way to the roar of turbines. The world had entered an age of speed, and yet, Karl Reinhardt worked as if time itself could still be repaired. He rented a small house near Dayton, Ohio, not far from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. His workshop was a converted barn, filled with the smells of oil, graphite, and soldering smoke. On quiet nights, he'd sit by the open window, listening to distant engines slice through the clouds. Each sound reminded him that his life had become something impossible. A German mechanic, once part of a defeated empire, now helping shape the very nation that had defeated him. He never called it redemption. He called it balance. By 1955, his influence had reached far beyond a single factory or base. Engineers who had trained under him were now leading projects for Boeing, Lockheed, and North American aviation. They carried pieces of his philosophy with them: efficiency married to empathy, precision without pride. "Build things to survive people's mistakes," Karl used to say. "That's how you save lives long after you're gone." One morning, A black sedan pulled up to his workshop. A man in an Air Force uniform stepped out, Colonel Jack Nolan. Time had given him gray hair, but the same spark lived in his eyes. The two men embraced like brothers. "You still fixing the world one bolt at a time?" Jack grinned. Karl smiled. "The world keeps breaking faster than I can mend it." Jack handed him a sealed envelope stamped "Confidential." Inside was an invitation, an advisory position for a new aerospace program. The United States was entering the space race. "We're building machines that won't stop at the sky this time," Jack said. "We need people who understand what keeps them alive out there." Karl hesitated. "You want me to build rockets?" "I want you to teach us how not to break them," Jack replied. In 1957, Karl joined a small team of engineers under what would later become NASA's Early Research Division. He wasn't a headline name, but his fingerprints appeared everywhere, from pressure-resistant valves to coolant systems derived from his old aircraft designs. He was once again the quiet mind behind the motion. For Karl, it wasn't about conquering space. It was about repairing faith that machines, built by the same species that once used them to kill, could now carry humanity toward something greater. He often told younger engineers, "Engines are like people. They break not because they're weak, but because they're pushed beyond what they were made for. Treat both with care." They laughed softly at his old-world wisdom, but they never forgot it. In 1961, when the first American astronaut rode a rocket beyond the atmosphere, Karl listened to the broadcast from his workshop. As static crackled through the radio, he felt tears sting his eyes. The sound of the launch reminded him of that winter morning near Bremen. The roar of engines, the scent of oil, the trembling earth. Only now that same sound wasn't destruction, it was ascension. He whispered to himself, maybe that's what it meant, to repair a future. That evening he walked to the edge of a quiet field. Fireflies flickered like tiny sparks, and the stars above looked closer than ever. For a moment he imagined all the engines he had touched, all the lives they had carried, American, German, and beyond. They weren't enemies anymore. They were echoes in motion. Years passed. The world changed again. Germany was divided by a wall. America landed on the moon. Karl aged quietly, his hands still steady but slower. The world rarely remembered men like him, mechanics, builders, the nameless architects of peace. Yet, wherever planes flew safely, his legacy lingered unseen, humming beneath aluminum skin. One winter in 1969, he received a letter from Boeing. Inside was a simple note. "Your maintenance redesign saved 36 pilots this year. Thank you." He folded the paper carefully, placed it beside his wrench, and said softly, "That's enough." Jack visited him one last time that summer. They sat outside under a wide Ohio sky, sharing coffee as the faint sound of a jet echoed far above. "You ever think the world's finally fixed?" Jack asked. Karl chuckled. "The world doesn't need fixing. People do. The machines are fine." They laughed together, two old engineers bound by a war that had turned into friendship. In 1972, Karl passed away quietly in his sleep, his workbench still covered in notes and sketches. When his neighbors found him, the radio was playing faintly, an old broadcast from years ago. "One small step for man." They buried him near the same field where he used to watch the stars. Jack arranged for a small metal plaque on his grave. It read simply, "Karl Reinhardt, mechanic, teacher, builder of peace." But his story didn't end there. Decades later, when historians reviewed early aerospace archives, they found technical drawings marked with a small insignia, a letter or inside a circle. Those schematics showed engine improvements, fail-safe mechanisms, and modular repair concepts that became standard in modern aircraft. The signature matched Karl's handwriting. He had left his mark not on nations, but on motion itself. Today, aviation historians sometimes refer to him as the man who taught America how to fix its wings. His innovations saved countless lives, not through invention, but through repair. a philosophy born in the ashes of war. And though his name never appeared in textbooks, his spirit lingers in every takeoff and landing, in every mechanic's careful hand, in every engineer's quiet triumph over failure. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't won by those who destroy, but by those who rebuild. The wind still howls over old airfields in Germany. The grass has grown where bombers once fell. Somewhere beneath that soil, perhaps near Bremen, the earth still holds the memory of a buried box, the one Karl hid so many years ago. Inside, blueprints faded to dust, but the idea they carried lived on. Engines hum, planes rise, and nations fall. But the act of repair, of rebuilding what's broken, remains eternal. So, if you ever hear the low thrum of an aircraft overhead, remember, somewhere in that sound lies the legacy of a man the world forgot, the German mechanic who repaired America's future. If you love untold stories from history's darkest hours, subscribe and join us on the next mission through time.